Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm your host, Jakari Jackson. It is November 25th, 2015, and here's a look at our top stories.
Tonight,
there's always been the idea that Turkey was supporting ISIS in some way. We know they've funneled people going through Turkey to ISIS. Someone's buying that oil that ISIS is selling. It's going through somewhere.
Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander General Wesley Clark says Turkey is indeed supporting ISIS. Meanwhile, Senator John McCain celebrates the latest developments in Syria.
I might do what we did in Afghanistan many years ago to give those guys the ability to shoot down those planes. That equipment is available.
Plus, Michael Moore tells the governor of Michigan that he's ready to take home Syrian refugees. Well, let's send them these guys. What do you say there, Michael? All that plus much more up next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
After Turkey shot down a Russian jet, all eyes are on the area, and now we have a former NATO general saying that Turkey is actually in support of ISIS.
All along, there's always been the idea that Turkey was supporting ISIS in some way. We know they've funneled people going through Turkey to ISIS. Someone's buying that oil that ISIS is selling. It's going through somewhere. It looks to me like it's probably going through Turkey.
And that was former NATO Supreme Allied Commander General Wesley Clark as he responded to yesterday's shoot down of a Russian fighter jet by pointing out that Turkey is in support of ISIS. But that's not to say that he is in support of Russia either. If you watch that full clip, he has some very harsh things to say about them as well. But as we talk about Turkey's involvement with ISIS, it was earlier this year, we have the flashback article about a Turkey prime minister who was caught arming ISIS. And some people saying, hey, this is just one rogue guy, his actions have no reflection on the Turkish military or Turkish government in general. And people said, okay, maybe that is true. But now that we have a former NATO commander coming out and saying these things, people are starting to wonder if Turkey does have a larger involvement. And the article says, Turkey's prime minister was caught shipping arms to ISIS in January, which may explain why the NATO ally shot down a Russian jet targeting ISIS militants on Tuesday. And as we stressed, we don't know 100% for sure what their motivation was. And we're going to talk to David Knight more about that in our coming segments. But as we talk about not just things that are going on foreignly, but we talk about things that are going on domestically and the terror alert in general, because we've seen, of course, the recent attacks in Paris. We've seen the attacks earlier in places like Dallas, going on all over the world. And now we have social media reacting to the State Department's declaration that pretty much the whole world is under a travel advisory. And just in case you didn't know, the State Department issued a worldwide travel warning for Americans just in time for the holidays. And this goes all the way through February 24th. So it goes through Thanksgiving, through Christmas, through New Year's. So if you're pretty much any place on planet Earth, they want you to be shaking in your boots, afraid of an imminent attack. Now we're going to take a look at some of these tweets here of people voicing their opinions about this. One person said, I was going to leave the office soon, but now what am I supposed to do? Another person said, well, at least Obama has ISIS contained to the planet Earth. Another said, does this advisory apply to golf courses in and around the United States? I'm pretty sure those would be pretty safe. And also, the president is having a bit of trouble containing this J team. As you guys may recall, Obama had previously stated that ISIS was the JV team, and they have been growing in strength somewhat thanks to our politicians. I don't want to say the government or military in general, but certain politicians continuing to fund these guys, not just ISIS, Al-Qaeda, different organizations doing different things. And that's always what it is, which so many people don't understand. They get, upset now because the TV tells them to get upset and jump up and come to the defense of the Syrian rebels, or should I say the Syrian refugees. And definitely my heart goes out to these people, but my heart goes out to them because we have an administration that's continuing to fund people who are making that region worse. They're funding Al-Qaeda, they're airdropping grenades to ISIS. And then after they use our tax money to go over there and tear up their country, they say use more of your tax money to bring them here. Meanwhile, Obama's not offering up his penthouse in Chicago. He's not housing people in the White House. When they go tear up Iraq, The Bush family isn't putting people on their private residence, but they want you, the American taxpayer, to fund all this stuff. And like I said, I do support a open borders policy as long as they pass the background checks, whatever that may be. I'm not exactly how deep that process goes, but we have seen the top advisor saying that, Mr. President, we can't vet 10,000 people at a time. And the Obama administration say, screw that, bring them all here. I don't know if it's guilty conscience or what exactly it is. You know, like I said, I do feel for the people, but it's really the top administration who should be taking care of this problem, not the American taxpayer. And now let's talk about this continued threat. And the FBI is saying, be aware of copycat killers, copycat attacks like we've seen in places like Paris. But Obama has said there is no credible plot against the homeland. The FBI sent a bulletin earlier this week to police departments across the country warning of possible copycat incidents and sharing intelligence on how the assailants in Paris carried out the attacks this past, or I guess a couple weeks ago, that killed 130 people. So they want you to be sober, vigilant, and all these things. And of course, you do want to be safe around the holidays. Yes, terrorists do like to target places like movie theaters or sporting events, malls, places like that. It's not always ISIS. It could be some domestic guy as well. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't go out and enjoy life, because after 9/11, we were told what? These people hate us for our freedoms. And when we sit around shaking in our boots, afraid to go to the football game, then yeah, the terrorists win. You don't want the terrorists to win. I also don't want the TSA to fill me up if I go to the Super Bowl, but that doesn't mean I want to sit around at the house. So, you know, just try to be as safe as you can this holiday weekend or the holidays in general. But once again, don't let people win by taking away your freedoms. Now, as I was speaking earlier about the White House doing all these things that make the rest of the planet worse, meanwhile, they're not housing people that come here seeking refuge, just like, you know, after Iran-Contra, you know, Reagan wasn't bringing people into his private ranch who were affected by that. Same thing with Bush, Obama, you know, any of these other politicians as well. And now Michael Moore, a guy who I'm not a fan of at all, but, you know, he made a decent statement here. He said, hey, I will house people who are refugees from Syria. Now, this is in wake of many governors, politicians talking about how they don't have a desire or a willingness to bring Syrian refugees to the country at this point in time because of terror concerns. Now, as I stated earlier, the Obama administration has a very large play in this, but now Michael Moore, a private citizen, is saying, hey, I'll bring people to my house. And I have no issue with private individuals, churches, other people who volunteer their homes to affected people, not just from Syria, they could be Pakistan, Yemen, Mexico, wherever. If private individuals and churches or people of that nature want to open their homes up, that's fine. My issue is when they try to force that on the American people. As the circle goes, we all know it goes all the way back up to the White House while the people are coming here anyway. Now, in a letter to Snyder, that is the governor of Michigan, that Moore posted on his Facebook page, the director wrote, I just want to let you know that contrary to your decision to deny Syrian refugees a home in our state of Michigan, I myself am going to defy your ban and will offer my home in Michigan to those very Syrian refugees you decided to keep out. He said he would contact the State Department and let them know that he is happy to house people in his home. I'm very curious to see if he follows up on that. I'd really like to see a statement from the State Department saying that Michael Moore actually did call them and offer his residence. If you did, good job you being a humanitarian. But once again, why don't we start holding the people who are doing these very anti-humanitarian things accountable when they go blow up these foreign countries. Now, to talk about things here domestically, if you're in the state of Florida, I guess you're in a pretty good state of mind right now, because I guess apparently all the police have caught all the rapists, murderers, child molesters. You don't have to worry about drunk drivers or anything else going on in your area, because the crime rate, in my mind, just from reading this headline, must have gotten so low that the police have nothing else to do but bust old women who are playing mahjong. Police bust weekly mahjong game played by elderly women, and the group was accused of the crime, 4 women between the ages of 87 and 95. One of the women said word spread about their weekly gathering, and a troublemaker in the community called the police, citing a law that prohibits playing the game for money. Police closed the clubhouse. And it reminds me of that old Seinfeld episode, like, what's the guy named Bookman? Like, this guy went around tracking down people and arresting them for having books or overdue library books. And that didn't just happen in a Seinfeld episode, that actually happened in real life. They said, hey man, if you don't show up with this book, you're going to go to jail. Eventually, the guy came in with a book. But it just goes to show like the hierarchy, the state of mind of the police state when they will just forego all these very serious, very heinous crimes to crack down on the old ladies. Probably there's some widows in there, I'm sure, 87 to 95. I'm pretty sure some of these ladies are just lonely and just want people to hang out with. So they get together, they want to have a mahjong game, they want to play poker, whatever they want to do. If they want to sit around smoking cigars and drinking beer and watching the game, I don't care what they do. They're old. They let them do what they want to do, but now the cops want to come down and bust these people. It's just completely ridiculous. At least they didn't show up with an MRAP and pepper spray them and flashbang them, but man, it is wild how they continue just to crack down people who just do pretty much nothing wrong whatsoever. Now, as we're talking about the police, let's talk about police and political correctness. And we have a sheriff saying that he is politically incorrect and very proud of it. This is the gentleman in Harris County, Georgia. And this is Sheriff Mike Jolly. Paid for by Jolly, the sign reads, "Warning, Harris County is politically incorrect. We say Merry Christmas, God bless America, and in God we trust. We salute our troops and our flag. If this offends you, leave." So this is a man standing up for the right to be politically incorrect, because we've all seen the war on Christmas. I'm not talking about this faux war, taking Santa Claus off coffee cups, and that has nothing to do with Christianity whatsoever. But we have seen people telling the kids you can't wear crosses in schools, all types of different things, saying you can't have a Christmas celebration in your town. You have to call it Winter Festival or, Christmas Tree Day or whatever type of silly things they do. Now this man is coming out saying, hey, I'm not going to fall for that. I'm going to exercise my rights to call Christmas what it is and greet people and say, God bless you and God bless America. Now, if you say that this sign offends you for whatever reason, you say it's wrong for a person, official, spokesman of the government to come out and say all these things and put up the sign saying that he's politically incorrect, I want to direct your attention to a statement made by Governor Cuomo from New York. And he says that gun-loving pro-lifers are not welcome in New York. He doesn't want these right-wing extremists. So while people will jump up and down, I'm sure, about Mr. Jolly in Georgia saying that he was politically incorrect and saying all the things that he said, a lot of people had no issue with Governor Cuomo saying that these extreme conservatives who are right to life, pro-assault weapon, and anti-gay, referring to Republicans, they have no place in the state of New York, the governor said, because that's not who New Yorkers are. He's saying, I'm going to tell you who New Yorkers are. They're people who think exactly like me. And of course, we know that's not the case. If the governor of Texas jumped up and said that, I'd say, no, I don't agree with everything you say. And one person actually put out a tweet. It says, if you want to live in New York, you have to agree with Governor Cuomo. What an arrogant, undemocratic mindset. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And as he was talking about guys who are anti-gun or, pro-gun, we all know these politicians, especially big governors, guys like that, they have armed bodyguards. So why can't the people of New York exercise their right to carry a firearm, Mr. Governor? Also saying people who are pro-life, right to life. What is possibly wrong with that? As I was talking about yesterday on the Alex Jones Show doing the Overdrive segment, I mean, all these people, they're anti-gun, they're, cracking down on drunk driving, which, of course, I'm not suggesting you go out and drunk drive, but they want to go out and ban all these things and put sanctions on all these type of activities. Meanwhile, they would be more than happy to kill a child in the womb. So it's like once the child is out the womb, we have to ban everything to protect the child, to put it in its little safe space like on South Park. But while it's in the womb, you can punch it, kick it, or rip it out, rip its head out. What the guy do, Kermit? He was twisting the heads off like a doll. Also, the lady saying that they would use the body parts and sell them for Lamborghinis. You can do all these horrific things to the child if it's in the womb, but as soon as it comes out, then they act like it's an actual person. No, it's a person even before it's born, even though you try to pretend that it is not. And as we're talking about people who pretend like things are not, Hillary Clinton wants you to think that Benghazi was not a big deal. I think it pretty much is, because they want to tell you that the situation with the Ambassador Stevens, was pretty much a miscommunication. What difference does it make? So you have a woman who has a private email server who, in my mind, would make her more accessible to it. If you have your own thing, you're like, I don't want to use something provided to me by the government. I have my own thing, which is allow me to respond to emails or information quicker. Fine, if it helps you do your job, but it obviously did not as is the case with Benghazi, because Ambassador Stephen, for months before his death, was asking, begging Mrs. Clinton, the situation's getting hot out here. Mrs. Clinton, can you give me more security? Mrs. Clinton, Mrs. Clinton, Mrs. Clinton, all the way up to the day of his death. And at that point, they did not give him more security. They actually took security away from him. Now, other people will tell you that it had something to do with arms and all this stuff. We don't have to focus on that. We can just focus on the bare issue that this man was dead or died because of Mrs. Clinton, who was out doing her campaign trail or greasing the skids for it. She has time to run around to all the feminist colleges and give speeches, but she doesn't have time to check the cables would actually save this man's life. And that's a very long-winded way of saying CNN reporter coordinated with Hillary aide to smear Rand Paul during the 2013 Benghazi hearing. Because you guys recall, Rand Paul is like, do you know anything about the arms shipments to Turkey? And she's like, to Turkey?
Is the U.S. involved with any procuring of weapons, transfer of weapons, buying, selling, anyhow transferring weapons to Turkey out of Libya?
To Turkey?
Stay tuned after this for more special reports. We're going to talk about the recent situation involving Russia and Turkey. A lot of he said, she said. Now we have the Russian foreign minister saying it was a planned provocation. And now we're having the debate, David, did they go over into Turkey? Did they have a prior warning? They're saying conflicting reports on that. They were warned 5 times, 10 times. They say 0 times on the Russian side. I know you've been following this. What exactly is going on?
Well, good news. Somebody in the U.S. government administration was maybe trying to de-escalate this, Jakari, because they talked to Reuters and they said, it looks like the Russians were in Syrian territory the entire time. So that would be good. What we also learned today was they had a press conference and they had the jet pilot who was shot down, who survived. And he said that he knew the region like the back of his hand. He couldn't possibly have flown into Turkish airspace. He was at the controls. He said Turkey did not give any visual signal or radio signal before the jet was shot at. He said there were no warnings, either by radio or visual. There was no contact whatsoever. If they wanted to warn us, they could have shown themselves by taking a parallel course, but there was nothing. The missile hit the tail of our aircraft suddenly. We didn't see it in time to do an anti-missile maneuver. Now, at the same time, the Russian foreign minister came out and said, as you mentioned, Jakari, that it looks like a planned provocation. He says, we have serious doubts that it was unintentional. It looks like a planned provocation, an obvious ambush. He says, it seems to me there were some contrived statements by NATO members. He says, we know that they had a meeting yesterday. You can't hide that. That's 28 different countries. And he says the fact that they have so many members there, some information leaks out. He said, we learned that it was very hot in there, a very heated debate. Turkey was sharply rebuked for the attack on Russia's plane. Okay, so all of this looks very similar. This could be just one person's, one side saying this, one side saying the other thing. Except as I mentioned yesterday, there were questions about why there was so many professional television broadcasters.
Yes, that's a very good question.
Exactly. There was a private Turkish broadcaster, Haberturk TV, but there was also footage from Turkey's Anadolu agency, which would be an official government agency. So you had multiple professional agencies who just happened to be there at the time. The Russian pilot who survived says there was no warning, which is typical protocol that you'd want to do before you shoot down another jet. But I think all of this shows that this is something that is a deliberate, provocative thing. I do agree with the Russian foreign minister because of the presence of these TV production facilities there.
Yeah, because when we talk about TV production, a lot of people don't understand this. News is very reactive.
Yeah.
Some stations, they have things like police scanners. So in some cases, you may get there before the police, but you still have to have a lead time to get there. If we go hear about a situation at UT, we have to get in the car, load up the cameras, and go over there and get there. And then you have traffic and everything else.
Yeah.
For a camera crew just to be standing right there, it's
two camera crews
standing right there. It's quite convenient.
And we read a tweet yesterday from a guy who says, well, did they just get lucky? I mean, that seems a little bit far-fetched. But let's take a look at what Drudge pointed out yesterday in his tweet. He said, a shocking truth is unfolding. America has been arming ISIS. And I think that's precisely the point. That's what we need to focus on to keep them from panicking us in a state of fear and uncertainty and doubt about what's going on, to keep them from panicking us into getting involved in this war. Let's play this clip from John McCain talking to Neil Cavuto.
We need to have a no-fly zone. We need to have a buffer zone for refugees. We need to provide.
No, I know that, Senator, but if they are attacking the very guys who we want to see topple Assad, You would let American planes just continue to pass them and let them do that?
Okay, hold it right there. Listen to what Neil Cavuto is saying. If they're attacking our guys, the guys that we want to get in power, that's more important than stopping ISIS, isn't it? Okay, so he's saying, Senator McCain, if they're attacking the guys that we want to replace in this political game just so they can get to ISIS, are we going to let them do that? Or are we going to shoot them down? And this is what McCain has to say.
No, but I might do what we did in Afghanistan many years ago to give those guys the ability to shoot down those planes. That equipment is available.
Yeah.
Who would be shooting them down?
The Free Syrian Army.
The Free Syrian Army.
Yeah.
Because as you know, David, it was a couple years ago, he goes to Syria. He's taking pictures with the Free Syrian Army, a.k.a. the al-Qaeda rebels. And he's saying, I know these guys well and all this stuff. And then it comes out that they're actually terrorists. He's like, I have no idea who these guys were. They photobombed me, basically.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't know who they are. And of course, when he's talking about, yeah, we know how to do that. We did that in Afghanistan. Who did they give the missiles to shoot down Russian planes to?
Mujahideen.
Mujahideen and Osama bin Laden, okay? The guys who became al-Qaeda. They keep rebranding them, hoping that we're not going to connect the dots, that we forget that all this stuff is there. But as you point out, it's a Free Syrian Army. And when we showed that clip of those guys shooting the rescue helicopter with a tow missile, we zoomed in on that yesterday and we showed the American riding it, clearly an American tow missile. And that's okay, that was a Free Syrian Army video. Okay, these guys are shouting Allah Akbar. And as Kurt Nimmo pointed out yesterday, he said McCain likes to talk about these guys as if they're his buddies, good old boys from Arizona, but they're nothing of the sort. He's got a quote from Ayub Nuri, who says, the FSA is not moderate. It doesn't claim to be. Most of its leaders and commanders have a strong jihadist tendency. They call their war against Damascus a holy war. FSA units and brigades carry Islamic names. Their black headbands are adorned with Quranic verses. They also launch their attacks and fire rockets into the cry with the cry of Allah Akbar. Exactly what we saw yesterday. So what they're doing, they're shooting a rescue helicopter. They're shooting pilots parachuting peacefully out of a plane that they've just, which is not what you would expect from our buddies, our guys back in Arizona, right? They're acting like terrorists, and of course blowing up the rescue helicopter. And then today we have footage showing these guys using an anti-tank missile blowing up Russian journalists close by in that area in a car. So, if they look like terrorists, they act like terrorists, they use the terrorist slogans, they're shooting journalists, they're shooting rescue helicopters, they're shooting people in parachutes, they are terrorists, and they are the Free Syrian Army. And of course, I guess we could have, though, John McCain celebrating dancing, because that equipment is now available. How did that equipment become available? Well, we pointed out back on October 10th, on INFOWARS, Saudi Arabia delivered 500 of these TOW anti-tank missiles to the Free Syrian Army. Same guys again. There's John McCain dancing. BBC correspondent Frank Gardner tweeted that a Saudi official confirmed the delivery of 500 TOW anti-tank missiles to the FSA. He said the delivery of TOW missiles were also provided by the CIA. So let's go back to, is there really a connection with these guys and the terrorists? Are they really terrorists? I mean, they certainly, if they look like terrorists, they act like terrorists, they talk like terrorists, they shout like terrorists. I think they're terrorists. But of course, this has been brought up before. We've had reports coming out, military reports. Sean Hannity confronted John McCain with this, and this is what McCain said.
I am concerned about this report about Syrian rebels and the ceasefire with ISIS. Senator
but
Paul,
that's not true.
Well,
it's not true. It's
you want
not
me to read
true.
from the,
Whether I don't care about the report. I know these people intimately. We talk to them all the time. I don't care about the report. I know these people intimately. We talk to them all the time.
Exactly. So he says, I don't want to hear this report. And he just keeps talking over him until he shuts up. And he says, we know these people intimately. We talk to them all the time. Well, just this week, we had Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency during Obama's tenure. He was on the Kelly file, and he talked about manipulation of ISIS intelligence. And he said, it's so bad, we need to have an investigation. Understand that when we had McCain running against Obama, they're both going to do the same thing for the globalists. Okay, we were given a choice of an old white guy or a young charismatic black guy. That was all it was. It was rigged so that Obama would win this. But are they really terrorists? This is a truth, as Drudge points out, that's been unfolding. It's been unfolding for quite some time. Going back to 2013, this article we had from INFOWARS, Free Syrian Army rebels defect to Islamicist group Jabhat al-Nusra And this was these are fighters who were defecting at the time. In December 17th, 2013, top Free Syrian Army commander defects to al-Qaeda-linked group. This guy was named Jamal. He was Saddam al-Jamal. He headed the Allah Akbar Brigade. Oh, they sound like our moderate rebels, don't they? The Allah Akbar Brigade. He was a top FSA commander. He then went more openly to al-Qaeda. In 2012, we had Hula eyewitnesses saying the Free Syrian Army was responsible for a massacre. This is a situation where they entered a city, they secured it, then they began killing people in a cleansing action against loyalists to Assad, executing elderly people, women, and also children. The dead were put on display for the United Nations and the corporate media. They were portrayed as victims of Assad's military. Nevertheless, they went back and they talked to the eyewitnesses, and you can see that video that's linked in that article. Then another one, August 12th, 2012, UN designates Free Syrian Army affiliates as al-Qaeda. That's the UN.
That's the UN.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much, David. You guys can find all these reports on INFOWARS.com.
Just how long can the international community pretend to keep its dirty secret in the proverbial closet that they actually support ISIS? Lines are clearly being drawn as NATO ally Turkey shot down a Russian jet fighter and then shot the ejected pilots dead as they descended in parachutes, claiming the jet was in Turkish airspace. Putin claimed the jet was down 4 kilometers from the Turkish border in Syria, as Putin expressed outrage, calling the attack a stab in the back and threatened consequences. The Russian rescue helicopter attending to the downed jet was shot down as well, fired on by Obama's supposed moderate Syrian rebels.
I do think that this points to an ongoing problem with the Russian operations, in the sense that they are operating very close to a Turkish border, and they are going after moderate opposition that are supported by not only Turkey, but a wide range of countries.
The incident occurred just days after Turkish officials warned Russia to immediately end its operation against ISIS after warplanes bombed border regions. Recently, it was revealed the Obama White House is giving ISIS a 45-minute warning before bombing their oil tankers by dropping leaflets advising potential jihadists to flee before airstrikes in Syria. The leaflet drops are justified under the premise that the oil tanker drivers might be civilians and not ISIS recruits, although it's an explanation that doesn't wash with critics. J.E. Dyer writes, "It's not like these drivers are innocent, uninvolved civilians like children or sick people. They're waging ISIS's war just like the other non-uniformed participants who make up 100% of ISIS's ranks. This is how far the Obama administration is going to avoid collateral damage." While it took the U.S. 15 months to even begin targeting ISIS oil refineries and tankers, airstrikes by Moscow destroyed more than 1,000 tankers in a period of just 5 days. In comparison, Colonel Steve Warren said the U.S. had taken out only 116 tanker trucks. U.S. airstrikes targeting ISIS oil assets are so rare that PBS was caught using footage of Russian fighter jets bombing an oil storage facility in Syria and passing it off as evidence of the U.S. targeting the Islamic State's oil infrastructure. U.S. military pilots have also confirmed that they were ordered not to drop 75% of their ordnance on ISIS targets because they couldn't get clearance from their superiors. The never-ending holiday propaganda campaign of fear is underway, as the State Department has issued terror warnings for every holiday since September 11, 2001. It is particularly fond of frightening people around Thanksgiving and Christmas. This year is no exception. On Monday, the State Department issued a worldwide travel alert. You're not safe anywhere. This travel alert expires on February 24, 2016. The alert posted on the State Department's website says, if you plan to travel abroad during the holiday, the government says you should register with them. Incidentally, in standard bullying doublespeak, Jay Johnson at the Department of Homeland Security declared there is no specific credible or imminent terror threat at this time, and you may safely travel. As the NATO allies and New World Order stalwarts impatiently sit on their hands, it is beginning to become abundantly clear the collateral damage to the hidden globalist-backed ISIS campaign Russia is racking up is reaching a breaking point. John Bound for INFOWARS.com. Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven, leader of the Swedish Social Democratic Party, has finally announced that Sweden is no longer capable of maintaining the crushing weight of the hordes of Syrian refugees flooding the country. The numbers don't lie. 10,000 migrants a week and an estimate of 190,000 new refugees will inhabit Sweden by the end of the year. Not to mention a rape epidemic sweeping Europe, transforming Sweden into the rape capital of Europe, all in the name of anti-racist, bleeding-heart liberal ideals engineered by big banking globalists, allowing the cancer the refugees are actually escaping from to spread throughout Eurasia, hidden within the refugees' ranks. An engineered, soft invasion. Sweden's past success was in part related to careful reforms and fiscal responsibilities now being exploited by Prime Minister Löfven's controllers. Jörgen Mason writes that in 2013, Löfven's press secretary announced that the newly elected leader of the Swedish Social Democratic Party will be present at Bilderberg, at the invite of Swedish philanthropist Jacob Wallenberg. Wallenberg was one of 35 members of the Bilderberg Steering Committee in 2013. Bilderberg's brainchild was the EU. Its financial control over the EU's socialist leaders sponsoring the soft invasion of refugees is blatantly obvious, and just 2 years after Löfven attended Bilderberg, by all accounts, Sweden could be facing a collapse.
Right now, we receive between 50 to 80,000 people a month. We can only offer them tents for shelter, and right now it's going to get the winter time here, and it's about to turn between -20 to -30 Celsius. This has come to a point when you no longer can call it racism, because the picture is so much bigger than that, and it's come down to humanity. And right now, Sweden can't manage. We are sacrificing our elderly. We are sacrificing our preschools, our kindergartens, our school system, our elderly care, and the welfare system as it is. If you say this in Sweden, you're considered a racist. Even if you never say that we're going to stop immigration, we have to kick everybody out, it's considered racism to criticize the politics for immigration and asylum.
The refugees in Sweden have mistaken kindness for weakness. The Scandinavian Viking berserker rage is beginning to boil. Protesters in Sweden have burned down 17 immigration centers in the past 2 months. But the refugees continue to stoke the fire, bringing the violence of Syria to their hosts. Immigrant riots spring up weekly in Sweden, and refugees in Malmö, Sweden, are blowing up cars and police vehicles with grenade attacks. Now, Phase 2 of the Bilderbergers' invasion is rolling out in the United States. The Washington Examiner writes, President Obama's open-door immigration policy is set to accept more immigrants from Muslim nations over the next 5 years than the entire population of Washington, D.C., according to federal documents. Figures from the Department of Homeland Security show that the president has already issued 680,000 green cards to immigrants from Muslim nations over the past 5 years. Unless Congress changes his policy, that number will be repeated in the next 5 years. 2016 is ramping up to be a year of cultural devastation that will hit a slowly awakening public like a Mack truck. John Bound for INFOWARS.com.
Dave, my mind is going. I can feel it.